You are not separate from the version of you who already has everything. You are entangled with it, right now. Not in some distant future. Not after you fix yourself. Not after you become ready. The connection already exists, and it is active in this moment. The quantum field is not waiting for your effort. It is waiting for a signal, and that signal is not what you want. It is who you decide to be. There is a version of you already living the life you keep imagining. That life is not hypothetical. It is not symbolic. It exists as a frequency. And through the mechanics of quantum entanglement, your consciousness is already linked to that version now. Not tomorrow, not later, now. The real question is not whether your dream life is real. The real question is why you are not tuned into it yet. When life feels stuck, when goals feel distant or unreachable, it is not because they are far away in space or time. It is because your current identity is still entangled with a version of you that hesitates, doubts, delays, and self-sabotages. And as long as that identity is the observer, that is the reality that collapses. The moment you shift who you believe yourself to be, not intellectually, not through affirmations, but through state, reality begins to reorganize around you. Most people never learn this. They spend their lives trying to force change from the outside in, hustling, pushing, struggling. Even when they find spirituality, they repeat the same pattern. They try to visualize a new life while staying entangled with the same identity that created the old one. Visualization without identity collapse does nothing. That is why this is not another explanation of manifestation. This is a deconstruction of reality itself. This is where quantum entanglement and quantum jumping intersect. Entanglement explains why your energy affects matter, why your internal state influences outcomes, and why your subconscious patterns are never operating in isolation. You are broadcasting a signal into the quantum field at all times. That signal is not your words. It is not your intentions. It is your frequency, the way your identity interacts with possibility. Quantum jumping is not magic. It is not escapism. It is an identity recalibration that allows consciousness to move between entangled realities. Realities where different versions of you already exist, waiting to be observed, activated, and lived. And here is the part most people miss. You have already felt this before. That moment when you made a decision and everything shifted instantly. That was a jump. That sudden change in perception, even if it lasted only seconds, that was a ripple across timelines. That deep gut knowing that you are meant for something more, that is not imagination. That is your future self bleeding backward through the field. Time is not linear. It is layered, which means your future self can reach you just as easily as you can reach forward toward it. You are already in a feedback loop with the version of you who made it. The connection is live, and that is the code. Quantum entanglement is not just a theory. It is one of the most documented and least understood phenomena in modern physics. In simple terms, it means that two particles, once connected, remain linked in such a way that a change in one instantly affects the other, regardless of distance. Einstein famously called it spooky action at a distance. But what almost no one talks about is what this implies for consciousness, identity, and lived reality. If matter can behave this way, why wouldn't you? You are not a single particle moving through empty space. You are a living field of awareness, a system of energy, perception, memory, and intention. And just like entangled particles, you are not only connected to other people, environments, and experiences, you are entangled with versions of yourself that exist across timelines. Versions that made different decisions. Versions that trusted instead of hesitated. Versions that healed instead of running. Versions that moved when you waited. You are not disconnected from them. You are either resonating with them or out of sync with them. And that resonance is what determines which version of you collapses into experience as your life. Here is where most people get trapped. They remain entangled with the version of themselves that is still surviving, still bracing, still afraid. Not because they consciously choose it, but because they were conditioned into it. Through repetition, through emotional imprinting, through identity loops so familiar they no longer question them. What you stay entangled with, you reinforce. What you reinforce, you broadcast. What you broadcast, the field reflects back as reality. This is why so many people say, "I've tried to manifest, but nothing works." The problem is not effort, it is signal. The unconscious signal they are transmitting is still coming from the version of themselves that doubts, delays, and does not truly expect life to respond differently. And the quantum field is precise. It does not respond to wanting. It does not respond to begging. It does not even respond to visualization alone. It responds to frequency. And frequency is not created by what you think for a few minutes a day. It is shaped by what you embody consistently, how you decide, how you tolerate, how you interpret, how you move through uncertainty. You are always observing reality, and the observer collapses the timeline. But which version of you is doing the observing? That is the question most people never ask. And it is why most people never jump, because quantum jumping is not something you do, it is something you become. You cannot shift timelines while still acting from the version of you that does not feel worthy of what you want. You cannot access a new reality while making decisions from fear, hesitation, or self-protection. The field does not care about your words, it cares about what you are entangled with. And here is something subtle but important. Sometimes the version of you who already lives the life you want is pulling on the connection. You feel it in flashes, in dreams, in moments where reality feels thin, in sudden clarity that disappears just as quickly. Those are not fantasies, those are bleed-throughs. The connection is already active. The only question is how long you will continue to ignore it. In the quantum field, time does not move in a straight line. It does not unfold neatly from past to present to future. Time is layered, simultaneous, responsive. Which means the version of you who already lives the life you want is not waiting somewhere ahead of you. That version already exists. And the connection between you is active right now. This is where things start to feel unsettling for the rational mind. Because if time is layered, then influence is not one-directional. Your future self can reach backward just as easily as you reach forward. You are not imagining that pull towards something more. You are not fantasizing a better life out of boredom or dissatisfaction. You are receiving feedback. That sudden moment when you saw yourself differently, even briefly, that was not motivation. That was resonance. That was a temporary alignment with a different observer state. A different version of you looked through your eyes for a moment, and reality shifted just enough for you to feel it. That is a timeline ripple. Most people experience these moments and immediately collapse back into the familiar. They dismiss it as imagination, as emotion, as coincidence. And by doing so, they re-entangle themselves with the old observer. But those moments are signals. They are proof that you are already inside a feedback loop with the version of you who has made it. Not made it in some external sense, but stabilized into a different identity frequency. This is the part most manifestation teachings avoid. The field does not need effort. It needs coherence. It does not need repetition of desire. It needs clarity of being. Your signal is not what you say you want. Your signal is what your identity expects. And expectation is not conscious. It is embodied. It lives in posture, in breath, in decision-making, in what you tolerate without questioning, in what you move toward instinctively, and what you avoid automatically. This is why so many people stay stuck even while doing the work. They try to visualize themselves into a new life while remaining entangled with an identity that still expects disappointment, delay, or struggle. They attempt to jump timelines without releasing the observer that keeps collapsing the same reality. The field cannot respond differently if the observer has not changed. Quantum jumping is often misunderstood as movement, as if you leave one place and arrive in another. But nothing actually moves. What shifts is the observer. When the observer changes, the collapsed reality changes with it. That is why this is not about wishing, hoping, or trying harder. It is about identity collapse. The deliberate release of the version of you that has been anchoring your experience to the same outcomes. And here is the paradox. The version of you who already lives the life you want is not separate from you. It is not superior. It is not unreachable. It is simply the version of you that stopped observing reality from fear. That version is already watching. The only reason you have not become it yet is because the identity you are currently collapsing keeps pulling you back into the same story. But once you see this, you cannot unsee it, because awareness itself begins to loosen the entanglement, and that is where the real shift begins. Here is the truth most people are not ready to hear. You do not jump timelines by doing more. You jump timelines by releasing who you are no longer meant to be. The identity you are currently collapsing into reality is not accidental. It is the result of years of reinforcement, beliefs repeated, emotional reactions rehearsed, decisions made from the same internal reference point again and again. And that identity is efficient. It knows how to survive. It knows how to explain why things do not work. It knows how to keep you safe inside familiar limits. But it cannot carry you into a new timeline. Most people stay entangled with this version of themselves not because it is aligned, but because it is known. Familiar struggle feels safer than unfamiliar expansion. Even limitation can feel like home when you have lived there long enough. This is why quantum jumping feels threatening to the nervous system. It is not a leap forward. It is a death, not a dramatic one, not a collapse of the body, but the quiet, conscious ending of an identity that no longer belongs in your future. And this is the moment where most people turn back, because letting go of an identity feels like losing control. It feels like emptiness. It feels like standing in a space with no reference points, no guarantees, no old stories to fall back on. But that empty space is not absence. It is the field before collapse. The quantum field does not respond to force. It responds to coherence, and coherence only emerges when the observer is clear. This is why visualization alone does not work. Visualization is something the old identity does to escape discomfort. It imagines a better life while remaining emotionally loyal to the same self-concept that created the current one. Quantum jumping is not escape. It is reclamation. And it begins with awareness, not affirmation, not imagination, awareness. The moment you clearly see the version of you that is currently choosing this life, how it thinks, how it reacts, how it interprets reality, the entanglement begins to loosen. You start to notice patterns, the tone of your internal dialogue when things go wrong, the assumptions you make without questioning, the emotional posture you return to when uncertainty appears. These are not random traits. They are the fingerprint of the observer you have been collapsing into reality. And here is the most important question you can ask yourself. Am I willing to let this version of me end? Not improve, not heal, not upgrade. End. Because a jump is not created by layering new beliefs on top of an old identity. It happens when the old observer is no longer given authority. This is the threshold, the moment where you stop negotiating with the self that cannot carry you forward. And once you cross it, even quietly, even internally, the field begins to respond, not with instant miracles, but with destabilization. Because when an identity collapses, the timeline it was holding together starts to dissolve with it. And that is exactly how you know the shift has begun. So how do you actually do this? Not in theory, not philosophically, but in lived experience. This is where most teachings become abstract or overly ritualized. They give names, techniques, symbols. But quantum jumping does not require performance. It requires precision. And precision begins with one thing only: presence. Before anything shifts in the field, the observer must become visible to itself. Start by asking yourself, without flinching, without defending, without correcting the answer, Who is the version of me that is currently choosing this life? Not the version you wish you were, not the version you perform publicly, the one that makes decisions when no one is watching. Notice how this version speaks internally during stress. Notice the assumptions it makes about time, money, relationships, worth. Notice how it responds when things do not go as planned. As you observe this, something subtle happens. You begin to separate awareness from identity, and that separation is the beginning of collapse. You may feel sensations in the body, pressure in the chest, tightness in the throat, heaviness in the stomach. These are not distractions. They are signatures. The energetic imprint of the observer you have been collapsing into reality for years. Do not judge it. Do not try to fix it. Witness it. Most timelines do not dissolve because they are resisted. They dissolve because they are outgrown with clarity. This is the first movement, witness. The second movement is severing. This is not emotional, it is declarative. You simply state, internally or aloud, with neutrality. This is no longer who I am. I release this version. I collapse this observer. There may be resistance. That is normal. The old identity will attempt to assert itself. It may sound reasonable, logical, protective. But the moment you recognize that voice as a pattern, not as truth, its authority weakens. The third movement is choice. Once the field clears, even briefly, you choose the new identity, not by imagining success, but by embodying a different frequency. Stand differently, breathe differently, respond differently. And here is the critical distinction. Do not ask, what would the version of me who has everything do? Ask, what does that version no longer tolerate? And stop tolerating it now. This is not a one-time ritual. It is a way of being. Each moment becomes a choice of observer. Each decision reinforces a different entanglement. And over time, not in years, but in energetic cycles, the field adjusts. Not because you are forcing it, because it has no alternative. Once the identity begins to collapse and a new observer takes position, something important happens that most people are not prepared for. The field responds, but not in the way movies or manifestation culture suggest. There are no immediate fireworks, no sudden perfection. What comes first is recalibration. When you install a new operating identity into a system that has been running the same frequency for years, there will be interference, noise, overlap, residual echoes from the old timeline. You may notice subtle shifts. People respond to you differently, even when you have not said anything new. Certain conversations no longer resonate. Some relationships feel strained or strangely distant. This is not punishment. This is not loss. This is energetic mismatch becoming visible. Energy always precedes language. The field reacts to coherence before it reacts to explanation. When your frequency changes, anything that was stabilized by the old observer begins to destabilize. And here is where many people panic. They mistake recalibration for failure. Old emotions may surface, fatigue may appear, doubt may whisper, nothing changed, you're still the same. But this is not regression. This is the echo of a collapsing timeline. Reality does not shift smoothly, it shifts quantumly, which means that when you step into a new observer state, everything that does not match it begins to fall away. And what falls away often resists before it releases. This is the moment most people undo the jump. They collapse back into the old observer, not because it was aligned, but because it was familiar. Familiar discomfort feels safer than unfamiliar coherence. So how do you stabilize the new timeline? You do not force it. You do not pretend. You anchor it. Anchoring is not affirming positivity while ignoring reality. It is responding to life from the new identity even when the external world has not fully updated yet. This is coherence. When circumstances still show scarcity, but you respond from abundance. When relationships feel uncertain, but you speak from wholeness. When fear appears, but you answer as the version of you who no longer negotiates with limitation. Every time you choose the new observer, in thought, in feeling, in action, you stabilize the field. Because the quantum field does not reward effort, it reflects consistency. The universe is not testing you, it is listening to you. And every subtle vibration you emit communicates who you believe yourself to be. So instead of asking, "Why hasn't my new reality arrived yet?" ask this: which version of me have I been reinforcing today? That is where the jump becomes real. Not in moments of inspiration, but in moments of doubt, when you choose coherence again and again and again. At some point, something subtle begins to happen. You stop trying, not because you gave up, but because effort is no longer required. The new identity stops feeling like a performance. It stops feeling like a role you are playing or a frequency you are trying to maintain. It becomes natural, obvious, quiet. This is integration, where decisions feel simpler, but more precise, where responses come from truth instead of protection, where old thoughts still appear, but they no longer carry authority. They pass through instead of pulling you back. You begin to notice that patterns which once activated you no longer do. Situations that used to trigger fear or urgency now register as information. Emotions arise, move, and dissolve without needing to become your identity. This is not numbness. This is regulation. The observer has stabilized, and when the observer stabilizes, reality updates. Not all at once, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Opportunities begin to align without force. Conversations open that never did before. Certain doors close without resistance. Other paths appear without explanation. Not because reality is rewarding you, because reality is responding. You are no longer broadcasting mixed signals. You are no longer oscillating between wanting and doubting, hoping and bracing. The field receives a clear transmission. This is why manifestation was never about attraction. It was about signal integrity. When you stop reacting from lack, lack loses its feedback loop. When you stop negotiating with limitation, limitation loses relevance. When you stop giving airtime to the self that never believed in you, that self fades, and the external world adjusts accordingly, not as a miracle, as mechanics. The observer collapses the wave, and now the observer is coherent. This does not mean life becomes perfect. Contrast still appears. Challenges still arise. But they no longer define you. They no longer destabilize your sense of self. Each moment becomes a simple question. Which version of me is being invited right now? And each time you answer from the new identity, the timeline reinforces itself. You may wobble. You may forget. You may briefly collapse into old patterns. That does not undo the shift. Each return to awareness retunes the field. Each regulated breath reasserts coherence. Over time, the old frequencies lose strength. What once required effort becomes effortless. And without noticing when it happened, you look around and realize that your external reality no longer matches the version of you who used to live here. That is not coincidence. That is stabilization. You are not faking it until you make it. You are feeling it until you stabilize it. There is a difference. And once stabilization occurs, reality has no choice but to reflect it. Now we arrive at the part that most people skip. Not because it is difficult, but because it feels deceptively simple. Living from this state. Quantum awareness is not something you turn on during meditation and turn off when life begins. It becomes the lens through which everything is interpreted. The way you walk, the way you listen, the way you respond when reality presents contrast. You stop asking how to control outcomes. You start asking how to maintain signal. Because control is a strategy of the old observer. Signal is the language of the field. At this stage, you no longer live from force. You live from coherence. And coherence is maintained not by perfection, but by remembrance. Each time life presents you with uncertainty, you return to the body. Each time fear arises, you regulate instead of react. Each time the old identity tries to narrate reality, you choose presence over story. This is how jumping becomes living. Not a peak experience, a baseline. Something else shifts here. You realize that the version of you who already lives the life you want was never separate. It was never distant. It was never waiting for permission. It was simply observing from a different reference point. And now, that reference point is yours. This is why the new life begins to feel normal. Not exciting in the old way, not dramatic, but grounded, stable, real. And when something becomes normal, it becomes real. Your timeline does not upgrade through force. It upgrades through embodiment. So breathe, not as a technique, as recognition. Feel what is different in your body right now. Not what you hope for, but what is already present. The subtle steadiness, the quiet clarity, the absence of urgency. That is your signal. That is your anchor. That is your proof. And before you go, understand this. If this message found you at the right time, it is not coincidence. It means something inside you recognized itself. Not learned something new, but remembered something old. That is entanglement activating. So do not let the algorithm decide when you remember again. Stay connected to this field, to this resonance, to this frequency you now carry. And in the comments, do not tell me what you want. Tell me what reality you are now embodying. Name it, not as a wish, as recognition. Because when you name the life you are living, you activate it in yourself and in others. That is how timelines shift together.